The moment my sister-in-law smiled while announcing my dead baby's name to a room full of cheering guests, something inside me cracked in a way I didn't yet understand, but it would change everything. My name is Emma Carter, and for years I lived in the cruel space between hope and grief, the kind where you almost become a mother 3 separate times, only to lose everything just when it starts to feel real. I wasn't just infertile, I was what doctors call recurrent loss, but what it felt like was being repeatedly promised a miracle, only to have it ripped away in the 2nd trimester, when you've already picked names, bought tiny clothes, and imagined a future that suddenly disappears. Through all of that, people tried to be kind. They brought casseroles, sent messages, held my hands when I cried. And then there was Vanessa, my husband's sister, who at first seemed like the most compassionate of them all. I remember collapsing into her lap after my first loss, her fingers gently stroking my hair as she whispered, "I'll always be here for you, Emma." And in that moment, I believed her. I truly did, even thinking that maybe I had gained a sister rather than just married into one. 2 weeks later, at her baby shower, that illusion shattered so cleanly it almost felt surreal. The backyard was decorated in soft pastels, laughter floating through the air. Everyone gathered around as Vanessa stood glowing with pride, one hand resting on her belly. When she finally announced the name, "We're naming her Faye," my stomach twisted violently, because that was the exact name Daniel and I had chosen for our daughter, the one we had buried just weeks before. I pulled her aside, my voice shaking as I asked how she could possibly choose that name, and she tilted her head with a smile that didn't reach her eyes and said, "Well, it's not like you were going to use it," and then laughed, loud and sharp, as if my grief were some private joke. When Daniel came over, confused by the tension, I tried to explain, but he just chuckled awkwardly and said, "Come on, it's just a name." And I told myself he didn't understand, that maybe no one could fully understand what it meant to lose something so intimate. I convinced myself to let it go, to believe that maybe, in some twisted way, my daughter's name could live on through someone else's child. And I threw myself into trying again, into being healthier, stronger, more disciplined, as if I could somehow control fate. But 1.5 years later, I lost another baby, and this time the grief felt heavier, quieter, like a weight settling permanently in my chest. A few weeks after that, I was standing in the vitamin aisle at a pharmacy when I saw Vanessa's post online announcing her 2nd son, James, and beneath the smiling photo she had written, "Thanks to Emma for the name inspiration. Her loss is my gain," followed by a laughing emoji and a skull. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped my phone, and when I showed Daniel, he frowned but still said, "She's just being insensitive, not malicious." And I remember thinking how strange it was that cruelty could hide so easily behind a smile. By the time she took the name Charlotte for my 3rd miscarriage, I felt numb, like a part of me had simply stopped reacting to pain because it was too much to carry. She would send me pictures of her children's nursery, captions dripping with mock sweetness, saying things like, "Bet you wish this was for your Charlotte," and every time Daniel would sigh and tell me I was being too sensitive, that Vanessa had always been a bit much, as if that explained everything. Years passed like that, 4 long years of trying, losing, and slowly giving up hope, until one night at a family dinner, Vanessa joked about which of my future baby names she should steal next, and everyone laughed except me, and something inside me finally broke in a way that felt different, colder, sharper, more deliberate. That night, lying awake beside Daniel, I realized I was done being the quiet victim in Vanessa's story, done pretending that what she was doing was harmless. If she wanted another name, I would give her one, but this time it would be on my terms. I crafted the lie carefully, weaving it into something believable, something irresistible to someone like Vanessa. At the next gathering, I pulled her aside with tears in my eyes and told her I had discovered a hidden name in my late mother's journal, something sacred and meaningful, something no one else knew like Sativa, I said softly, explaining that it meant sacred child in an ancient dialect, even showing her fabricated diary pages and a carefully curated collection of images to sell the story. Vanessa's eyes lit up in that hungry way I had come to recognize, and I knew instantly she had taken the bait. Within days, she was announcing it everywhere, proudly declaring that her unborn daughter would be named Lexativa Rose, a tribute to hidden family history, and for the first time in years, I felt a quiet, dangerous satisfaction settle in my chest. It wasn't justice, not yet, but it was something, a small reclaiming of power after years of being stripped of it. I thought that would be enough, that exposing her in a subtle way would bring me some kind of closure, but life has a way of shifting the ground beneath you when you least expect it. Because 8 months later, when I thought I had nothing left to hope for, I discovered I was pregnant again, and this time, everything felt different. I found out I was pregnant in the most ordinary way possible, staring at a test in our bathroom at 6 a.m. But the moment felt anything but ordinary because for the first time in years, hope didn't feel like a trap. It felt real, terrifyingly real. I sat on the edge of the tub, hands shaking, whispering, "Please stay," as if the tiny life inside me could hear and choose to listen. When I told Daniel, his eyes filled with tears before he even smiled, and he pulled me into a hug so tight it felt like he was trying to hold the moment together, saying, "We'll be careful this time. We won't tell anyone until we're sure." And I nodded because neither of us could survive another loss made public. Weeks turned into months, each one a quiet milestone we celebrated in private. And when I reached 29 weeks, I finally allowed myself to breathe a little easier, to imagine bringing a baby home instead of planning another goodbye. Around that same time, Vanessa sent out invitations to her baby shower for Lexativa, complete with elaborate decorations and a guest list that included not just family but her growing audience from her parenting blog. I almost didn't go, but something inside me, a mix of defiance and closure, pushed me to attend. I chose a loose, flowing dress that concealed my pregnancy, and Daniel supported me without question, his hand steady in mine as we walked into the party, where Vanessa stood at the center of it all, basking in attention like it was oxygen. The event was even more extravagant than her previous ones, every detail curated for admiration, and as she began her speech about discovering this sacred family name, I felt a strange calm settle over me when she said, "Lexativa means sacred child in an ancient dialect." I stood up before I could second-guess myself and said, "Actually, I have something to share too," smoothing my dress as I revealed the unmistakable curve of my belly. The room fell silent in a way that felt almost cinematic, every eye locking onto me as I added, 29 weeks today, we wanted to be sure this time. And suddenly, the silence broke into gasps, cheers, and tears. But Vanessa just stood there, frozen, her expression cracking for the first time. Daniel, who had spent years avoiding conflict, surprised me then by stepping forward and saying casually, "Hey, Vanessa, you were talking about Lexativa." "Right. All that research you did," and when she nodded stiffly, he pulled out his phone and added, "That's weird, because when I search it, all I get are medical sites about constipation relief." A ripple of confusion spread through the room, followed by awkward laughter, and I had to press my lips together to keep from laughing out loud as Vanessa's face flushed a deep, furious red. We didn't stay long after that. Daniel squeezed my hand, and we left together, stepping out into the evening air with a shared sense of triumph that felt fragile but real. For a few hours, I allowed myself to believe that things had shifted, that maybe we had finally taken back some control. But at 4 a.m. the next morning, I woke to a sharp, familiar pain that froze my blood. It was the kind of pain you don't mistake, the kind that carries memory with it, and as I clutched my stomach, whispering, "No, no, no," Daniel was already awake, already helping me into the car, his face pale with fear. The drive to the hospital felt endless and instantaneous at the same time, and deep down, I already knew what the doctors would confirm, because I had lived this moment before. The miscarriage was explained in clinical terms, complications they couldn't fully identify, but none of that mattered because all I could hear was the echo of loss, louder than anything else. I lay in the hospital bed staring at the ceiling, numb in a way that felt different from before, heavier, darker, because this time I had let myself believe we were safe. When we returned home, the silence in the house felt suffocating, every corner filled with things we had carefully prepared, things that now felt like reminders of something stolen. It wasn't until later, when I went to take my nightly prenatal vitamins, that something clicked. The bottle was in the trash outside, not where I had left it, and when I picked it up, turning it over in my hands, a cold realization settled in my chest. Vanessa had been in our house just 2 days earlier, insisting she wanted to help organize the nursery, smiling that same sweet, practiced smile, and suddenly every detail felt wrong. I whispered, "She did this," before I could stop myself, and Daniel, who had spent years defending her, didn't argue this time. He sat down heavily, staring at the bottle, his hands trembling as he said quietly, "I think you're right." The police couldn't prove anything. Of course, the bottle had been tampered with, but whatever substance had been used didn't leave a clear trace, and without direct evidence, it was just suspicion, grief, and anger tangled together. But for me, there was no doubt, no room for uncertainty. Because I knew Vanessa. I knew the way she operated, the way she smiled while cutting you open. Sleep became impossible after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, heard her voice, felt the weight of everything she had taken from me, and something inside me shifted again. Not just pain this time, but determination. I started documenting everything, every message, every post, every cruel comment she had ever made, spending hours at my laptop piecing together a pattern I had been too broken to see before. And then, 3 weeks after losing my baby, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Vanessa wasn't working alone. 3 weeks after the miscarriage, I uncovered a connection so disturbing it made every piece of the puzzle snap into place with terrifying clarity. And suddenly, Vanessa's cruelty no longer felt random, it felt orchestrated. I had been sitting at my laptop late one night, around 11 p.m., combing through old memories and details I had ignored before, when a name surfaced in my mind like something I had buried without realizing it: Chloe Bennett. She was Vanessa's best friend, always lingering at family events, always asking questions that felt just a little too personal, especially about my treatments, my prescriptions, my routines. And then it hit me. Chloe worked at the pharmacy where I filled all my prescriptions, including my prenatal vitamins. The next morning, I drove there without telling Daniel, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white when I walked in and saw Chloe behind the counter. Her eyes met mine for a split second before she immediately turned away, pretending to organize something in the back, and that was all the confirmation I needed. I followed her down the aisle, my voice steady in a way I didn't feel as I said, "We need to talk," and when she turned to face me, her expression had already cracked, fear flickering across her features. I mentioned the vitamins, watching her closely, and she stammered, "I don't know what you're talking about," but her hands were shaking so badly she could barely keep the bottles aligned on the shelf. That evening, Vanessa posted on her blog about toxic family members making false accusations, and within hours, my phone exploded with messages from strangers calling me jealous, unstable, attention-seeking, people who had never met me but were suddenly convinced I was the villain in a story Vanessa had carefully crafted. Daniel deleted his social media accounts after the harassment spread to him, and we sat in our living room with the curtains drawn, the house feeling less like a home and more like a place under siege. He kept apologizing, over and over, his voice breaking as he said, "I should have seen it sooner. I should have believed you." And for the first time, I saw not just his guilt but his anger, something solid forming where his passivity used to be. Despite everything, we agreed to attend the next family dinner at Vanessa's house after his mother called, crying and begging us not to let a misunderstanding tear the family apart. The moment we walked in, I knew it was a mistake. Vanessa had placed baby Lexativa's bassinet right in the center of the room like a centerpiece, the name embroidered in delicate stitching on the blanket, a constant, deliberate reminder throughout dinner. She made pointed comments about people who couldn't handle others' happiness, her voice sweet but sharp, and I focused on my plate, refusing to give her the reaction she wanted. At one point, she excused herself to feed the baby, leaving her laptop open on the kitchen counter, the screen still glowing. I don't know what compelled me to move, but I found myself standing in front of it moments later, pretending to pour water while my eyes scanned the screen. My heart started pounding as I saw subject lines, emails about fertility herbs, miscarriage-inducing remedies, discussions that made my stomach turn. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and snapped photos as quickly as I could, each image feeling like a piece of truth I had been searching for. "What are you doing?" Vanessa's voice sliced through the air, and I spun around, my phone still in my hand. She lunged for it immediately, her nails digging into my wrist as she hissed, "Give it to me!" But I held on, adrenaline surging as we struggled in the middle of her kitchen. Daniel rushed in at the sound of the commotion, and for the first time, he saw her without the mask, her face twisted with rage, eyes wild, nothing like the smiling woman she showed the world. In an instant, she switched tactics, tears appearing as if on cue as she cried, "She's gone crazy, just like I told you." But Daniel didn't move toward her this time. He stepped between us, his voice quiet but firm as he said, "We're leaving," and took my hand without hesitation. We drove home in silence, my wrist throbbing where she had scratched me, and when I showed Daniel the photos, his face grew paler with each one. The next morning, Vanessa escalated things further, posting a long story painting me as unstable, claiming I had attacked her in her own home, even suggesting I had been faking my pregnancies for attention. Her followers believed every word, flooding my accounts with hate, and when my mother-in-law called, she didn't ask for my side. She simply said, "You need to apologize," her voice cold with disappointment. And when I shouted, "She poisoned my baby," she snapped back, "Don't be ridiculous. You need help." The situation spiraled quickly after that. Vanessa reported me to Child Protective Services, claiming I was mentally unstable and unfit to adopt, revealing a private process Daniel and I had just begun. A social worker came to our house, polite but cautious, explaining they had received dozens of complaints, all eerily similar in wording, clearly coordinated. We provided everything: medical records, references, anything to prove the truth, but the damage had already been done. Our application placed on hold while they investigated. Then came the next blow. At another family dinner, while Vanessa was occupied, I checked her laptop again and found more evidence emails detailing her plans, but this time she caught me, and the confrontation escalated further, her desperation barely contained. The following day, she posted edited security footage that made it look like I had been invading her privacy, and the internet turned on me even more viciously, strangers calling me dangerous, demanding I be arrested. A few days later, my phone rang, and when I answered, Chloe's voice came through, trembling as she whispered, "Meet me at the park on Elm Street, alone," and something in her tone told me this wasn't another lie or deflection. It was the beginning of the truth finally breaking through. I almost didn't go to the park that afternoon, but something in Chloe's voice, thin, trembling, and stripped of all pretense, told me this was the moment everything might finally come into focus. So I left at 3 p.m., my stomach tight with a mix of dread and fragile hope. She was already there when I arrived, sitting rigidly on a bench near the playground, watching children run and laugh as if she didn't belong in the same world as them. And the second I sat down beside her, she blurted out, "I can't do this anymore." Vanessa's gone too far, her voice cracking under the weight of whatever she'd been holding in. I didn't interrupt, didn't push, just let the silence stretch until she continued, whispering, "The vitamins." She made me switch them. She said it was just herbs, something to calm your anxiety, but I knew it wasn't right, and my hands curled into fists as I asked quietly, "You knew what they could do, didn't you?" She looked away, tears spilling over as she nodded slightly and said, "She had dirt on me. I've been skimming pills from the pharmacy. Nothing major, just enough to get through my own anxiety, but she found out and threatened to report me unless I helped her." The confession felt like a blade sliding into place, confirming what I had already known in my bones, but hearing it out loud made it real in a way that was almost unbearable. I reached for my phone instinctively, but she grabbed my wrist, shaking her head frantically as she said, "No recordings. I'll deny everything if you try to use it. I just needed to tell you, and to warn you." And something in her tone made my chest tighten as I asked, "Warn me about what?" She glanced around nervously, lowering her voice even further as she said, "She's not done. She's been stealing your mail. She has copies of your adoption paperwork. She knows everything your agency, your caseworker, all of it." And for a moment, I couldn't breathe because it suddenly explained the missing letters, the strange delays, the feeling that we were always one step behind. I tried to convince her to go to the police, to tell someone officially, but she pulled away, panic flooding her face as she said, "I can't lose my job. I have kids." And then she was gone, leaving me sitting there alone, surrounded by the sounds of other people's normal lives while mine felt like it was unraveling thread by thread. That evening, when I told Daniel everything, something in him hardened in a way I had never seen before, and within hours he had installed security cameras around our house, changed the locks, and redirected our mail to a secure box. His movements precise and controlled, as if he had finally stepped into a role he should have taken long ago. "We're not letting her touch anything else," he said quietly, and I nodded, because for the first time, it felt like we were preparing to fight back instead of just to survive. Thanksgiving came faster than I expected, and despite every instinct telling me to stay away, we went to his mother's house, tension hanging in the air so thick it felt suffocating. Vanessa arrived late, as usual, making a show of her entrance with all 4 of her children dressed in matching outfits, her smile dazzling and false as she greeted everyone like nothing had changed. Throughout dinner, she made pointed remarks about mental health and letting go of jealousy, her eyes flicking towards me just long enough to make sure I understood every word was meant for me. And Daniel sat beside me, silent but rigid, his jaw tightening with each passing comment. Then, as dessert plates were being cleared, Vanessa stood up and tapped her glass, drawing everyone's attention as she said, "I have an announcement," her hand drifting to her stomach in that familiar gesture that made my chest ache. "We're expecting again," she continued, and the room erupted in congratulations, but her eyes were locked on mine as she added, "And if it's a girl, we've chosen the perfect name Margaret, after Emma's dear departed mother." And the words hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I stood so quickly, my chair scraped loudly against the floor, my voice barely above a whisper as I said, You wouldn't dare! And she tilted her head, smiling with pure venom as she replied, Why not? It's a beautiful name, and someone should use it since you clearly can't. Daniel was on his feet instantly, his voice low and dangerous as he said, That's enough. Vanessa, you've crossed every line. But she only laughed, her composure cracking as she raised her voice and said, She's the one who's been snooping, spreading lies, trying to ruin me. I'm just honoring family. And the room descended into chaos. Voices overlapping, accusations flying, children starting to cry. In the middle of it all, Vanessa pulled out her phone and began live streaming, her expression shifting seamlessly into a performance of victimhood as she said, You can all see how I'm being attacked in my own family. And Daniel grabbed my hand, pulling me toward the door as he said firmly, We're leaving. As we stepped outside, her voice followed us, sharp and taunting as she called out, You might want to check with your adoption agency. Emma, I heard they've received some very interesting information about your mental health, and my stomach dropped because I knew, with chilling certainty, that she had already set something else in motion. By the time we got home, the message was waiting for us. By the time I pressed play on the message from our adoption caseworker, my hands were already shaking because deep down I knew Vanessa hadn't just made a threat she had followed through. The voice on the recording was calm, professional, but there was a tension beneath it as she said, Emma, we've received documentation regarding your medical history that requires immediate clarification. Please call us back as soon as possible. And when I ended the message, I felt something inside me sink, heavy and cold. Daniel didn't hesitate, pulling me close for a brief second before saying, We'll handle this together. And we called back immediately, putting the phone on speaker as the caseworker explained that records had been submitted indicating I had a history of psychiatric hospitalizations, including diagnoses of delusional disorder and pathological lying. For a moment, I couldn't even process the words because they were so far removed from reality, and all I could manage was, That's not true. I've never been hospitalized except for my miscarriages. My voice breaking despite my effort to stay composed. The caseworker remained neutral but firm, explaining that they would need full verification of my medical history before proceeding. And when the call ended, I collapsed onto the bedroom floor, the weight of everything finally crushing down on me. Daniel knelt beside me, his arms wrapping around me as I cried, whispering, She won't win, I promise you. We're going to fix this. But even as he said it, I could feel how much had already been taken. The next morning, we went straight to the hospital to request my records, and what we found there confirmed our worst fears in a way that made my stomach turn. The administrator pulled up my file, her brow furrowing as she scrolled. Then she turned the screen toward us and said, These entries don't look right. And there it was, multiple psychiatric admissions, complete with fabricated notes, dates, and diagnoses that had never existed. This is fraud, she added, her voice tightening as she explained they would launch an internal investigation. But all I could think was how far Vanessa had gone, how deeply she had embedded herself into my life just to destroy it piece by piece. It took 2 weeks to have those false records removed and officially documented as fraudulent. And during that time, Vanessa escalated everything. She created fake social media accounts in my name, posting erratic, disturbing messages about wanting to take other people's children, and sent anonymous tips to my workplace questioning my stability. Daniel started wearing a small camera everywhere, documenting every interaction, every call, every encounter. His quiet transformation into someone vigilant and unyielding, both comforting and heartbreaking to witness. I should have done this years ago, he muttered once, and I squeezed his hand because there was no point living in what should have been. The breakthrough came from the most unexpected place, Vanessa's own daughter. It was early evening, around 7 p.m., when the phone rang and Daniel answered, his expression shifting instantly as he put it on speaker and said softly, Faye. Her small voice came through, hesitant but determined as she said, Aunt Emma, I need to tell you something. Mommy makes us lie about you. And my heart clenched as she explained how Vanessa rehearsed stories with them, making them repeat lies about me until they sounded convincing, telling people I was mean, unstable, dangerous. I don't want to do it anymore, she whispered. You've never been mean to us, and we recorded every word, adding it to the growing collection of evidence that now filled folders on Daniel's computer. But Vanessa found out, she always did, the very next day. She posted about how I was manipulating children, twisting even that into something vile, and her followers took it as permission to escalate their attacks. My phone filled with threats, messages so cruel I couldn't even read them all. And then someone posted my workplace address online. Within days, protesters showed up outside my office, holding signs that called me a baby killer, a predator, things that made my chest tighten with humiliation and fear. My boss called me into his office, his expression sympathetic but strained as he said, "I know this isn't your fault, but it's affecting the company. Maybe you should take some time off until things settle." And just like that, I lost not just my peace, but my place in the world outside my home. It felt like Vanessa had reached into every corner of my life and poisoned it, leaving nothing untouched, and yet, somehow, she still wasn't finished. 2 weeks later, at Daniel's grandmother's 90th birthday, we thought we might finally have a moment of normalcy, a brief escape from the chaos. But even there, she found a way to corner me. I went to the restroom alone, needing a moment to breathe, and she followed, checking each stall before turning to face me in the mirror, her reflection calm and almost bored as she applied lipstick and said, "You should just give up. You're never going to be a mother." I didn't respond, remembering Daniel's camera was recording, and after a pause, I asked quietly, "Why are you doing this?" She smiled, meeting my eyes through the mirror as she said, "Because you took my brother away from me. He was supposed to be mine, always. And then, almost casually, she added, the vitamins were just a little help. Emma, you were never meant to be a mother anyway." My heart pounded as I turned and walked out without another word, clinging to the hope that this time, finally, we had her confession recorded. But when we checked the footage that night, the camera had died just minutes before she entered the restroom. And once again, we had nothing. That night, when we realized the camera had died at the exact moment we needed it most, I felt something inside me fracture in a way that was quieter than before, but far more dangerous, because hope was starting to feel like a liability. Daniel sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the useless device in his hands as he whispered, "This can't keep happening." And for a long moment, neither of us spoke, the weight of everything pressing down until it was almost unbearable. Then, just when it felt like we had reached the end of what we could endure, his phone rang, and the name on the screen changed everything. Liam. We agreed to meet him the next morning at a small cafe at 9 a.m., both of us unsure what to expect. But when he walked in, he looked nothing like the composed man I had known at family gatherings. He was exhausted, his eyes hollow, his movements hesitant as he sat down and slid a worn leather journal across the table without a word. "I didn't go looking for this," he said finally, his voice low and strained. It fell out of her bag, and once I started reading, I couldn't stop, and something in his expression told me this was bigger than anything we had seen so far. My hands trembled as I opened the journal, and page after page revealed the truth in Vanessa's own handwriting, detailed accounts of everything she had done to me. Her satisfaction at each miscarriage, her coordination with Chloe, even notes about manipulating social media narratives and planting false information in my medical records. But it didn't stop there. The deeper I read, the more I realized this wasn't new behavior. It was a pattern that stretched back years. There were entries about sabotaging a cousin's wedding, about poisoning her own mother-in-law's cat out of spite, about getting a college roommate expelled by planting evidence. "I don't know who I married," Liam said, his voice breaking as he ran a hand through his hair. "I'm filing for divorce, and I'll testify if you need me to, whatever it takes." And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt something shift, not relief exactly, but the sense that we finally had something solid, something undeniable. We spent the rest of that day making copies of every page, preserving it like evidence in a case we were finally ready to fight. But Vanessa, as always, moved faster. The very next morning, police showed up at our door with a warrant, their presence abrupt and invasive as they explained they had received a report about illegal substances in our home. I stood frozen in the living room as they searched through everything, opening drawers, overturning boxes, dismantling the fragile sense of safety we had tried to rebuild. Of course, they found nothing. But that didn't matter, the damage was already done. Neighbors watching from their windows, whispers beginning before the police cars had even left. After they were gone, Daniel found the note tucked beneath our doormat. Vanessa's handwriting unmistakable as it read, "Stop now or next time they'll find something." And I felt a cold, steady anger replace the fear that had consumed me for so long. That night, we made a decision we weren't going to keep reacting. We were going to confront her, expose everything, and force the truth into the open where she couldn't twist it anymore. We called a family meeting at Olivia's house, telling everyone we had something important to share, and when Vanessa arrived, she looked almost amused, as if she believed we were finally ready to surrender. Daniel connected his laptop to the television without a word, and as the screen flickered to life, he began presenting everything: photos from her emails, the documentation of the fake medical records, the messages from Chloe, Liam's testimony, even the recording of Faye's voice describing how her mother had coached her to lie. The room fell into a heavy silence as the evidence unfolded. each piece dismantling the carefully crafted image Vanessa had built over the years. I watched her face shift from smug confidence to irritation, then to something closer to panic, and when Daniel opened the scanned pages of the journal, that panic turned into fury. "This is fake," she snapped, jumping to her feet, her voice rising as she pointed at us and said, "They're trying to frame me because they're jealous of my life." But Liam stood up then, his expression steady despite the pain in his eyes as he said, "It's real, Vanessa. I've seen the original. You need help." And something in the room broke open. Olivia gasped, her hand covering her mouth as she whispered, "The cat." It wasn't an accident. And others began speaking up, sharing moments they had dismissed before, small instances that now formed a pattern too clear to ignore. Vanessa's composure shattered completely then, her voice rising into a scream as she hurled accusations at everyone in the room, calling them liars, traitors, ungrateful, her rage spilling over until she grabbed a vase and threw it against the wall, glass shattering across the floor. "You think you can destroy me?" she shrieked, her eyes locking onto mine with a hatred so intense it made my skin crawl. "You barren witch! You'll never have what I have." And before I could react, she lunged at me, her nails reaching for my face. Daniel and Liam moved at the same time, pulling her back, but even as they restrained her, she kept screaming, her voice raw and unhinged as she spat. "I should have used something stronger in those vitamins. I should have made sure you could never try again." And the room went completely still, every sound dropping away as the weight of her words settled over us. Even Vanessa seemed to realize what she had just admitted, but it was too late. Olivia's voice, when it came, was cold in a way I had never heard before as she said, "Get out of my house, and don't come back," and for the first time since I had known her. Vanessa looked truly alone. Her children clung to Liam, refusing to go with her, their fear and confusion written plainly across their faces. And without another word, she turned and left, the door slamming behind her with a finality that felt like the end of something long overdue. The aftermath moved quickly after that, faster than I could have imagined, as if the truth, once exposed, couldn't be contained anymore. The moment Vanessa's words hung in the air, her own voice admitting what she had done, I knew everything had changed. Not just for me, but for everyone who had spent years pretending not to see the truth. The silence that followed her outburst wasn't confusion anymore. It was recognition, and once that door opened, it couldn't be closed again. Olivia broke down first, her voice trembling as she reached for my hand and said, "I'm so sorry. Emma, I should have believed you." And for the first time, I saw genuine remorse in her eyes instead of denial. Liam moved quickly after that, filing for emergency custody of the children and a restraining order, his resolve steady despite the devastation written across his face. Chloe, terrified of losing everything, came forward with a full confession, providing messages, receipts, and details about how Vanessa had forced her to switch my vitamins, and suddenly the pieces we had been chasing for months fell into place with undeniable clarity. Vanessa's carefully curated life unraveled almost overnight. Her blog, once filled with followers who admired her, collapsed when excerpts from her journal were leaked, revealing the truth behind her persona. And the same audience that had once defended her turned on her with equal intensity. The adoption agency called us soon after, their tone apologetic as they explained that the investigation into the false claims had cleared my name completely and that our application would not only be reinstated, but prioritized. It felt surreal, like stepping out of a storm into sudden sunlight. But I didn't allow myself to fully trust it yet, not after everything we had been through. 3 months later, Daniel and I stood in a courtroom at 11 a.m., finalizing the adoption of newborn twins, a boy and a girl who would become Charlotte and James, names that once symbolized loss now reclaimed as something living and whole. As I held them for the first time, their tiny fingers curling instinctively around mine, I felt a kind of peace I had never known before, a quiet certainty that despite everything Vanessa had taken, she hadn't managed to take this. We signed the papers with hands that no longer trembled, and when the judge smiled and said, "Congratulations," it felt like a chapter of pain had finally closed. But Vanessa wasn't finished yet. As we stepped out of the courthouse, the twins cradled in our arms. Daniel stiffened beside me and murmured, "Don't look." But I already knew. She was standing across the street, partially hidden behind sunglasses and a cap, but her posture unmistakable, her gaze fixed on us with a hunger that made my skin crawl. Before we could move away, she crossed the street, her voice cutting through the moment as she called out, "Those names were mine to give," and security intercepted her before she could get close. I watched as they escorted her away, her protests growing louder, but for the first time, I didn't feel fear, I felt distance, as if she no longer had the power to reach us the way she once had. That illusion didn't last long. Within hours, she had already started again, creating new accounts, reposting photos of our adoption announcement with twisted captions accusing us of stealing her children, and the harassment reignited like a fire that had never fully gone out. We installed additional security, changed doctors, tightened every aspect of our lives, but Vanessa found ways to linger at the edges, showing up in public places just far enough away to avoid violating restrictions, sending letters through her lawyer filled with thinly veiled threats disguised as reconciliation. The breaking point came when she approached Daniel in a parking garage, grabbing his phone and smashing it against the concrete before fleeing. And although we lost that recording, the security cameras captured everything. A warrant was issued, and after a week of evading police, she was finally arrested following another incident at Liam's house, where she was found trying to force her way in with a bottle of unmarked pills, claiming they were special vitamins for the children. This time, there was no easy way out for her. Bail was revoked after she violated multiple restraining orders, and the charges against her grew heavier with each new piece of evidence. The trial that followed was long, but it was also inevitable. Testimony after testimony painted a picture that was impossible to deny Chloe's confession. Liam's journal, the recordings, the falsified records, the harassment campaigns, and when Vanessa took the stand against her lawyer's advice. She unraveled completely, her words contradicting themselves until finally, under direct questioning, she admitted in a quiet, chilling voice, she didn't deserve to be a mother. That was all it took. The jury returned a guilty verdict in less than 2 hours. She was sentenced to 15 years, with the possibility of parole after 7, and as she was led away, she turned once, her expression unreadable, and said softly, "Take care of my Emma." And I never knew if she meant me or the child she had brought into the world in the middle of her unraveling. Because life, in its strange and complicated way, wasn't finished weaving our stories together. A few weeks after the trial, we received a call from Child Services about that baby, a little girl who needed a home, who had done nothing to deserve the chaos she had been born into. Daniel and I spent hours talking, weighing the pain against the possibility of something better. And in the end, the answer came quietly but firmly. Love was bigger than everything she had done. Saying yes to that call felt like stepping into the final, most unexpected chapter of a story I never would have chosen but somehow survived. And as I held that tiny baby girl for the first time at 10 a.m. in a quiet office, I realized that life had come full circle in a way I couldn't have imagined. We named her Emma, keeping the name Vanessa had given her, but adding a new middle name, Hope, because that was what she represented. Not her mother's darkness, but something brighter that we were choosing to build. Bringing her home to Charlotte and James was a moment I will never forget. The twins, curious and gentle, accepting her without hesitation, as if love didn't need explanation, only presence. The months that followed were chaotic in the way only life with 3 babies under 3 can be, filled with sleepless nights, laughter, small milestones, and a kind of joy that felt earned rather than given. Slowly, the fear that had once shadowed every moment began to fade, replaced by routines that felt normal park visits without scanning every face, doctor appointments without suspicion, family dinners where laughter wasn't laced with tension. Liam and the children visited often, and watching them heal was its own quiet miracle. Faye, now more confident, would sit beside me and help with the babies, once telling me softly, "I want to be a good sister, not like my mom was." And I reassured her that she already was. Olivia changed too, her regret turning into action as she poured her energy into being the grandmother she hadn't fully been before, doting on all the children equally, never again dismissing what she didn't want to see. Daniel grew into a version of himself I think had always been there beneath the years of quiet compliance, protective, present, unwavering in ways that made me fall in love with him all over again. In me, I found something I hadn't realized I had lost: peace, not the absence of pain, but the ability to live without it defining every breath. Vanessa became a distant presence, reduced to occasional updates through legal channels, reports of therapy sessions, behavioral evaluations, a life contained within walls she could no longer manipulate. I didn't follow her story closely, didn't feel the need to, because my life was no longer tied to hers. The damage she had caused would always be part of our history, but it no longer dictated our future. Her children grew stronger without her influence. Her youngest daughter thrived in a home built on love instead of control, and the family she had tried to fracture found a way to rebuild. Not perfectly, but honestly. Years passed in a rhythm that felt almost surreal after everything we had endured. Charlotte became thoughtful and observant, always asking questions, always wanting to understand the world around her. James remained lighthearted and warm, the kind of child who could make anyone smile within minutes. And little Emma, our Emma, grew into a gentle, joyful presence, her laughter filling the spaces that had once held silence. We told them the truth as they grew, carefully and honestly, teaching them that families are not defined by perfection, but by the choices people make, that love is not something you're owed, but something you build. On their 5th birthday, we hosted a party in our backyard, the same kind of setting where years ago I had stood and watched my grief be turned into someone else's celebration. This time, though, the air felt different, lighter, real. All the cousins were there, laughter echoing across the yard, Olivia smiling through tears as she watched her grandchildren play, Liam standing beside his new partner, a quiet stability replacing the chaos of before. As I lit the candles on the cake, Charlotte reached for my hand, James leaned against Daniel, and Emma clapped excitedly. And in that moment, I felt something settle deep inside me, a sense of completion I hadn't known I was searching for. Later that night, after the house had quieted and the children were asleep, I sat alone for a moment, looking through a box I had kept hidden away. Inside were the ultrasound photos of the babies I had lost, the names Vanessa had once stolen, the pieces of a past that had shaped me in ways I could never undo. I added new photos to the box: Charlotte, James, and Emma together, smiling, alive, proof that loss and love can exist in the same story without canceling each other out. Then I closed it gently, not as an act of forgetting, but as a way of honoring everything that had brought me here. If there's anything this story taught me, it's that revenge doesn't always look like destruction. Sometimes it looks like survival, like building something beautiful in spite of everything that tried to break you. Vanessa thought she could take everything from me, my babies, my future, my identity, but in the end, all she really did was reveal who she was and force me to become someone stronger than I ever thought I could be. If you've ever faced someone who tried to tear your life apart, I hope this reminds you that their actions don't define your ending, you do. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And tell me in the comments what you think real justice looks like, because sometimes the sweetest victory isn't revenge at all, it's peace.